Well, Odebrecht is the company that actually, in a way, forms a pillar of all this scandal.
March 2016, Brazil. Federal investigators searching an Odebrecht facility aren't looking for a smoking gun. They already have one.
Earlier this month, Peruvian authorities created a special team to investigate the millions of dollars in bribes.
What they find instead stops them cold. An office, not a suspicious invoice buried in a filing cabinet, not a secret account in the Cayman Islands, not a rogue employee skimming contracts. An entire office, staffed, operational, humming along quietly inside one of the most respected corporations in Latin America. Its sole function was paying bribes. Not occasionally, not in a crisis, full-time, every day. As routinely as the legal department reviewed contracts or the finance team processed payroll.
But even before this investigation began, for many Peruvians, the name of this Brazilian construction firm was synonymous with high-level corruption in the corridors of power.
The company was Odebrecht. Founded in 1944 in Salvador, a coastal city in northeastern Brazil. By 2014, Latin America's largest construction and engineering group. 200,000 workers, operations in 23 countries, roughly 100 billion reais in annual consolidated revenue. And somewhere inside that empire, a department with its own staff, its own software systems, its own shadow budget, and its own encrypted communications network, dedicated entirely to corruption. Between 2001 and 2016, that department paid approximately $788 million in bribes across more than 100 projects in 12 countries. It generated an estimated $3.336 billion in illicit benefits for the company. This isn't the story of a company that cut corners. It's the story of a company that industrialized corruption so completely.
It's been a few years now since this scandal initially broke, even though it continues to entangle business leaders, politicians, and associated companies in a swampy and fetid mess up until present day.
That investigators didn't find evidence of crime. They found the crime's office. Section 1. The Foundation. Salvador, Bahia, 1944. Norberto Odebrecht is 29 years old when he founds Construtora Norberto Odebrecht with almost nothing, a small regional construction firm in northeastern Brazil, one of the poorest parts of the country. He is not a criminal, he is a builder. Over the next 4 decades, Norberto turns a regional firm into a national institution. Brazil is growing fast. Roads, bridges, dams, public housing. The country needs builders, and Odebrecht learns to be the best one. The company expands into petrochemicals, infrastructure, and engineering. It moves beyond Brazil's borders into Latin America, Africa, and beyond. By the time Norberto's son Emilio takes over leadership around 1990, the company is no longer a construction firm. It's a conglomerate, a dynasty. Then comes the third generation. Marcelo Odebrecht, Norberto's grandson, rises to the top by 2009. He inherits not just a company, but an empire. By 2014, Reuters describes Odebrecht as Latin America's largest engineering group, operating in 23 countries with more than 200,000 workers. Here's the thing about empires built on government contracts. They don't stay neutral. They can't. In Brazil, the biggest infrastructure contracts flow through state entities: Petrobras, the national oil company, federal ministries, state governments. Winning those contracts requires relationships. Relationships require maintenance. Maintenance requires money. The transition from legitimate builder to systematic corrupter didn't happen overnight. U.S. prosecutors placed the beginning of the admitted bribery conspiracy at 2001. That's not when Odebrecht became corrupt. It's when the corruption became organized enough to document. By 2006, organized wasn't a strong enough word anymore, because by 2006, what Odebrecht had built wasn't a bribery scheme. It was a bribery infrastructure. Section 2. The Machine. Here's how you hide $788 million in bribes inside a legitimate company. You don't hide it, you systematize it. By 2006, Odebrecht had formalized its corruption into a dedicated internal unit, the Division of Structured Operations. The U.S. Department of Justice, in its own charging documents, described it as a standalone bribery department. Not a euphemism, not an interpretation, that's what it was. The division ran on two parallel software systems. MyWebDay handled the operational side, requesting payments, processing them, tracking the shadow budget, generating spreadsheets for money that officially didn't exist. It was the bribery department's accounting software. Drowsies handled communications, secure encrypted messages between division members and outside operators, all running under code names, passwords, and coded references for politicians and intermediaries. It was the bribery department's internal messaging system. One system to move the money, one system to talk about moving it, both completely separate from Odebrecht's legitimate corporate infrastructure. The money itself moved in 5 steps. First, a business unit needed political influence. To win a contract, protect a budget approval, kill a regulatory threat. The request went up the chain. Second, the division drew from its shadow budget, funds quietly siphoned from legitimate corporate flows through inflated service fees, overhead charges to subsidiaries, and undeclared retainers. Third, the money moved offshore into shell companies, entities named Smith & Nash, Architects, Golak. None of them appearing on Odebrecht's balance sheet as related parties. Fourth, the funds layered through up to 4 levels of offshore bank accounts, specifically to distance the source from the recipient. Fifth, delivery, either by wire transfer to a nominated account or in cash in packages or suitcases at locations predetermined by the beneficiary. 21st century encryption at the top, suitcase drops at the bottom. At Petrobras, Odebrecht joined what the DOJ called a cartel of contractors. Rival companies would sit together, not to compete, but to choreograph competition. They divided upcoming Petrobras contracts in advance, agreed which firm would present the real bid, and had the others submit cover bids to maintain the illusion of a fair process. Then bribes flowed to Petrobras executives and political parties to keep the arrangement running. One Petrobras-related project alone involved more than $40 million, directed to Brazilian political parties through the structured operations system. This wasn't bribery. It was a parallel economy running inside a legitimate one. The machine worked because it was invisible. But invisibility has limits, especially when you're operating across an entire continent. Chapter 3: The Reach. By the time investigators began pulling threads, the Division of Structured Operations had extended across 12 countries on 3 continents. The US DOJ documented the geography precisely. Venezuela received approximately $98 million, the largest single country amount outside Brazil. Panama received more than $59 million. Angola more than $50 million. Argentina more than $35 million. Ecuador more than $33.5 million. Guatemala approximately $18 million. Colombia more than $11 million. Mozambique approximately $900,000. Total outside Brazil approximately $439 million. Inside Brazil approximately $349 million. Combined $788 million. Illicit benefits generated $3.336 billion. Inside Brazil, the political contamination ran to the highest levels of government. Reuters reported that Marcelo Odebrecht alleged Guido Mantega sought major campaign funding for Dilma Rousseff, including a reported 100 million reais figure. That allegation should be treated cautiously. Key Lava Jato and Odebrecht evidence was later nullified in Brazil, and related proceedings involving Mantega were weakened on jurisdictional grounds. Michel Temer's PMDB party was accused of receiving an illegal $40 million payment arranged through Odebrecht at a 2010 meeting. Temer called it a lie. A corruption charge against him was blocked in the lower house while he was president. He was later arrested in 2019 in a separate probe tied to nuclear plant construction. And then there was Lula. Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, 2-term president, the most popular politician in Brazilian history, became the symbolic center of Lava Jato's political dimension. Odebrecht-related accusations included real estate benefits and illegal financing linked to his institute.
Reunião. Ela foi tão rica, nós não podemos levantar.
Encoded references inside the division's own files, prosecutors found aliases used for politicians and intermediaries, a codename culture that turned corruption into a bureaucratic language. The company didn't buy individual politicians. It bought systems, party financing, campaign infrastructure, regulatory protection, budget approvals. The division of structured operations wasn't paying for favors. It was paying for an operating environment in which Odebrecht could function without friction. That distinction matters because it means the corruption wasn't occasional. It was structural. And structural corruption leaves structural evidence. Evidence that one investigation in a small Brazilian city was about to find. Section 4. The Unravelling. March 2014, Curitiba, Brazil. Operation Car Wash, Lava Jato, begins as something almost mundane, a money laundering probe into 4 criminal networks operating out of a gas station and car wash. Federal police following doleiros, illicit currency traders, through their financial networks. Nobody is looking at Odebrecht yet. But the doleiro networks lead somewhere. They lead into Petrobras. Petrobras leads into the cartel of contractors. The cartel of contractors leads to the largest construction company in Latin America. Judge Sergio Moro oversees the judicial phase from Curitiba. Prosecutor Delton Dallagnol leads the task force. Together, they build a case that expands with every search warrant.
A ideia básica do Estado de Direito é que ninguém está acima da lei. E vamos ser bastante francos, se
Every seized hard drive, every executive who decides cooperation is preferable to prison. By mid-2015, the investigation has climbed to Marcelo Odebrecht himself. June 19, 2015, Sao Paulo. Federal police arrive at the offices of Latin America's largest construction company. Marcelo Odebrecht, billionaire, third-generation heir, one of the most powerful CEOs in Brazil, is arrested and taken into custody. On March 8, 2016, he is sentenced to 19 years for bribery, money laundering, and organized crime. Then comes Operation Zipa, March 22, 2016. Investigators don't just find evidence of the bribery department. They find the department itself, an office kept exclusively to pay bribes. Not just on Petrobras contracts, but on World Cup stadiums and Olympic legacy infrastructure. The story transforms in that moment. Petrobras was just where investigators entered. The corruption ran through everything Odebrecht touched. Every stadium, every highway, every port, every pipeline across 3 continents. The walls were closing fast. But the walls didn't just close on Odebrecht. When 77 executives decided to talk, they brought an entire continent down with them. Section 5. The Detonation. December 21st, 2016. U.S., Brazilian, and Swiss authorities announced the global settlement simultaneously. The Department of Justice calls it the largest foreign bribery resolution in history. Combined penalties for Odebrecht and its petrochemical affiliate, Braskem, at least $3.5 billion. Odebrecht's share, $4.5 billion, later reduced to $2.6 billion after an inability to pay analysis. Of that amount, approximately $93 million goes to the United States, $2.39 billion to Brazil, $116 million to Switzerland. On January 30th, 2017, Brazil's Supreme Court approves the plea statements of 77 Odebrecht executives simultaneously. That morning, across 12 countries, the people who believed they were protected Find out they aren't. In Peru, the scandal moved beyond implication. Former President Alejandro Toledo was convicted in October 2024 and sentenced to 20 years and 6 months for accepting up to $35 million in Odebrecht bribes in exchange for awarding public works contracts. In September 2025, he received a second sentence of 13 years and 4 months for laundering $5.1 million of that money through an offshore company. The sentences run concurrently. In Panama, Ecuador, Colombia, Venezuela, and Argentina, the 77 confessions trigger investigations that reshape political landscapes for years. In Brazil, the fallout reaches 3 consecutive administrations: Dilma Rousseff, Michel Temer, and Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva.